are a digital agency that helps organizations transform what they do and how they do it, using digital as a catalyst for this change. And what we work with like some really fantastic clients across a variety of sectors. And we really get to kind of dive into how they think about digital. What they really have in common is a kind of a sort of shared purpose and kind of understanding of the world. And there's sort of lots of shared challenges and opportunities across a lot of these clients and across these sectors. Really, they're kind of united in the value they bring to their audiences, communities, and wider society. So there's a lot of what we talk about around digital sustainability in particular that chimes with a lot of our clients across these sectors. So why does digital sustainability matter? I mean, today's topic is paper and digital, as Lee mentioned. And what we really want to do is kind of address the myth that digital is better than paper, because really that's only true if it's done right. And we always need to be conscious of our impact on the planet, whatever that is. And when it comes to sort of operations, that covers a number of different areas. So I'll be focusing on digital today. So to start with a little bit of context, a broader context, not just around digital, this diagram really is a breakdown of sort of carbon emissions by source. So you can see here on the bottom left, the current sources and how, what takes up the most in terms of the carbon emissions that go into the atmosphere. What we can also see at the end of that is around 40% goes into natural sinks, so whether that's land or water, but around 60% remains in the atmosphere, which really tells us that it's essential we focus on reducing our carbon emissions. And digital might not seem like a big part of that. It's not electricity production, food, agriculture, and land use industry and things like that, but it is a really big and growing contributor to carbon emissions. This is a kind of quite striking stat that we often try to bring up because it really does illustrate the problem. The digital industry is responsible for almost 4% of global carbon emissions, which is more than the aviation industry, which I think is quite a big shocking stat. And that's actually growing as well. So I think that stat was from around 2023 and it's estimated around 6% now. And we're looking at the current rate, a growth of around 25% by 2050, which is just huge. So what are our biggest challenges and what are the biggest contributors to those carbon emissions from digital? To start with, I think we want to talk about website traffic and hosting. So more people than ever are online, consuming richer content. That's, images, videos, more immersive experiences, and things like that. And then there's data management. So all of that content needs to be stored somewhere. And that's not an invisible cloud that exists in our imaginations. It is it's got a physical presence. And these are massive resource intensive data centers around the world. And then finally, artificial intelligence. It wouldn't be a talk on digital without mentioning the thing that everyone's talking about, AI. It's here and the pace of change is really overwhelming. It's quite exciting and scary in equal measure, but we can't really deny that it poses a significant risk to the environment. So I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into these three areas and starting off with website traffic and hosting. So yeah, the number of internet users is rapidly increasing, as I mentioned, and that's up to about 68% last year. And in terms of the content that they're consuming, that's a lot of richer images, videos, live streams, immersive experiences, more than ever before. And so since the Paris Agreement in 2015, we've seen the average web page size, because of that increase in sort of richer media and things like that, up by 70% on desktop devices and around 143% on mobile, which is quite astronomical when you think about it. And what we really need to do is consider how we're balancing the digital experiences, those live streams and images and videos that we really want to our users to experience, how we're balancing that with the carbon cost of that additional data and traffic. And we'll talk a little bit about solutions and how we kind of tackle those problems a bit later on. And so, yeah, rising internet traffic with population growth isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's quite natural. But I think when you think about this big stat down here, 51% of that not being being bots, that's not so natural, obviously. So again, something that we need to look at tackling. And then onto data and digital asset management. So with that increase in traffic and internet usage, we've seen a rapidly increasing energy consumption by data centers. Which again, in turn, has an increase in data storage and processing required. So this is really kind of driven, but large file transfers have taken up like per user data consumption quite rapidly. And then we've seen like Microsoft and Google, who aren't obviously the most forthcoming with sort of negative information about their operations. Even they are sort of saying, you know, we are seeing this massive increase in carbon emissions, which does put net zero targets in doubt. And then onto artificial intelligence. So yeah, training a large AI model can emit more than 284,000 kilograms of carbon dioxide, which is the equivalent to the lifetime impact of 5 cars. So the true carbon cost of AI models is still quite largely opaque. Big tech isn't really known for its transparency around these things. But from what we can gather, we know that the impact is huge and is increasing. Water is also a really big deal when it comes to kind of environmental impact of AI and data centers. Water is used for cooling computers at data centers, which is, you know, increasing usage of AI models just exacerbates that need. Sam Altman of OpenAI fame, he said that ChatGPT uses about 0.5 milliliters of water per prompt. But some estimates take that to sort of 500 milliliters per session. We are not entirely sure on what those on where those figures are from and what they actually what's actually accurate. But even if we take Sam Altman at his word, 0.5 milliliters of water per prompt scaled across sort of 700 million weekly users of ChatGPT is going to be a large impact. And one study also estimates that AI could account for up to 6.6 billion cubic meters of water use by 2027, purely for cooling purposes. That's half the UK's annual water consumption. So we can really see the kind of problems that this brings. So I don't want to talk all gloom and doom and sort of just outlining the problems. That a lot of what we're here today to talk about is what we can do and what are those sort of starting points, actions that we can take to begin to tackle those problems. So to start with, there's an organization called the Green Software Foundation who've got a really helpful sort of 3 pillars for digital sustainability, and at Manifesto we've added a 4th as well. So those are energy efficiency, so the energy used to power the digital infrastructure; hardware efficiency, so the hardware running the digital infrastructure; carbon awareness, which is really about like empowering people to make decisions about the use of the digital infrastructure; and then finally inform and educate, so about raising awareness of why digital things cause emissions and how that is being addressed. And I think if we have those sort of 4 areas that we can focus our attention, we'll hopefully arrive at some useful solutions. Speaking of which, on energy efficiency, there's a list of things that we can start to look at here. I'm not gonna, we don't have loads of time, so I'm not going to talk through all of these in detail, but I'll pick out a few things here. I think one of the things I mentioned about the bot traffic making up over 50% of internet traffic from, I think that was from last year. Blocking known bad bots can save at least 5% of your web bandwidth, which just reduces unnecessary emissions overall. It also protects you and your visitors from malware and improves your SEO. So it's really a win-win. That's a really great place to start. And then that second one, ensuring people can find what they're looking for efficiently and leave, is a great one. I really like that as a designer, because we're often designing experiences that keep users on our websites, and we want them to be engaged and stay on our websites as much as possible. But actually, as a user, and if we put ourselves in a user's position for a moment, you often want to arrive at a website, find what you're looking for, and not stay on it forever. You want to be able to have a good experience, get the answers that you're looking for, and leave. So I think tailoring ourselves towards that and designing more efficient experiences is a really important thing that we can be doing, helping users find what they need quicker, spending less time on our sites and leaving feeling happy and satisfied that they've got what they needed. And then finally, there's a few things down here around sort of images and image formats. I think what we can do is optimize media using modern lightweight formats. So everyone will probably be familiar with sort of JPEGs and PNGs, which have been common image formats across the web for a number of years. But there are newer formats, WebP and AVIF formats, which are much lighter weight and do actually preserve most of that quality, especially on digital. That allows us to kind of create, still present images and things like that to our users, but really much lighter weight, really reducing page weight in the process. And things like with video, we can do things like not loading video embeds from YouTube or Vimeo or whatever by default on our web pages, but instead having sort of image thumbnails that are quite lightweight. The user doesn't actually then get that third-party embed coming through until they click on that and it fetches the video for them. So that's a really useful way that we can look at including video on our websites. And also being more purposeful with how we're using media. So I see a lot of websites which are just very, have fantastic photography and video content, but really overdo it. And I think being more purposeful with where we're using it, being really meaningful, thinking about context and relevance is really important in the design process, really kind of that less is more approach. And you can be really impactful with that without overloading your web pages with lots of visual content. So that's one way that we can really reduce that sort of page weight as well. And then moving on to hardware efficiency, there's a few crossovers here as well. That Brad Bots thing does cross over into the sort of hardware side of things. I think one thing that we can really do here is about thinking about the content and data we're producing and what is being stored effectively. So thinking about reusing rather than reproducing data. Do we really need to create new information and content? Is there something that exists that can be repurposed? Also, one thing that a lot of organizations miss, and there's a lot of outdated information and content across the internet, is actually identifying and removing old, redundant or obsolete data, and making a point of actually removing those things, doing an audit of what content exists online and making sure we're removing those things when they're no longer relevant or needed. Looking at things like page visits and things like that, who's actually interacting with this content, is it useful for our audiences? If not, is there a need to keep it, and can we remove it? And then also like ensuring hosting and other server architecture and client devices are being used efficiently as well. And then on the kind of awareness side of things, I think one of the things that we can do, and there's some sort of extreme examples and maybe more idealistic examples here around sort of thinking about how and when we might use energy. So trying to sort of like weight things towards using the energy from the grid when it's at its greenest. This is a really great example of a website called Branch that is probably an unrealistic goal for a lot of people, but actually is a really useful illustration of a website that presents a different experience depending on the state of the grid. So when the grid's at its dirtiest, they don't load all of the images, they load a much lighter weight version of the website at that point. And then also, I think one really important thing that we do at Manifesto and we really try and speak to our clients about is making sure that the planet is a stakeholder in the decision-making process. And if we can really bake that into our thinking, into our decisions and into our strategies, it really allows us to make sure that we are doing everything we can to reduce our emissions and to consider digital sustainability across that board, and not just in digital. I think that really does apply on and offline across operations. And I think that things like ambitious site commitments also can act as a sort of compass and a challenge to ourselves. Things that we're not currently doing but we want to be doing, or goals that we want to reach, that really set that if we publicize those things, then we are not only held to it by ourselves internally, but also by our audiences and our users. And I think that's a really important thing as well. It means that we are actually talking the talk or walking the talk and setting ourselves those goals and challenges and allowing ourselves to be measured against them. So how do we bring all of those sort of things together? At Manifesto, we've developed a sustainability audit that we run with a number of our clients. And what this is really designed to do is about giving our clients a clear set of actions to reduce their carbon emissions. So it gives them all of the information they need to understand the impact and also the resources to undertake them. In most cases, what we do is create a sort of backlog of costed projects that are focused around key areas, and allows them to immediately translate that into a sort of roadmap of actions. And to Lilli's point at the top of the call about, you know, the road to sort of sustainability being a process, it's not something we can tackle all at once. I think that's very much how we see this. And as part of the sustainability audit, we help clients construct this roadmap of sort of actions that can be taken now, to actions that can be taken soon, and more long-term sort of things that can be done in the future over a period of time. And we base that around sort of ease and kind of like barriers and things that we might need to kind of overcome in order to get around to those actions. So I think that's a really important way of thinking about it. In terms of what those focus areas are, I think with the sustainability audit and those actions, I think really key takeaways from what I wanted to talk about today are around sort of reducing the page rate. So what can we do to reduce the page rate? We try to aim for less than 2 megabytes per page, which in itself is quite a lot. I think we can often go a lot lower than that. It depends on the type of organization, the type of media and content that you're working with. Also minimizing the use of third-party web tools and services. A lot of these are quite heavy and add to that weight. Optimizing, minimizing CSS, JavaScript, other content as well, images and videos there. Hosting optimization is a big thing. So reducing server usage, minimizing storage usage, data footprint and transfer as well. And also, I think, caching optimization, serving data through caches, and both on the back end and the front end, and optimizing CDN usage. These are quite technical terms, so I'm not expecting everybody to understand that. But there's a lot of things that we can do and areas that we can focus on. So optimizing and reducing as well. And then here's a quick example of a sort of case study where we've done this in practice. The Royal Collection Trust are an organisation that are kind of in charge of the Royal Collection, as the name suggests. And they're a client of ours where we've run a sustainability audit. And what that's allowed us to do is really reduce drastically their page rate. So well below 1 megabyte. The Royal Collection Trust, given it's an organisation that's in charge of the collection, has obviously on their website a lot of images of the objects within the collection. So there's a lot of really rich content on their website. So it's no mean feat getting that page rate below 1 megabyte. Really big achievement. There are other things that we are also working on a longer term process of trying to kind of look for alternatives around some of the third party tools, things like Google Tag Manager, cookie managers, video scripts and things like that we might be able to provide alternatives for and reduce that further as well. And that includes also longer term actions and strategies to further sort of reduce emissions, blocking bots, which we would predict to reduce site bandwidth by at least 6%. So there's some really brilliant like takeaways from this. We've been really happy with it all. And often actually a lot of the changes that we make lead to like directly to performance improvements as well. And we've seen that with the Royal Collection Trust. So it is if people are struggling to kind of get stakeholders and senior sort of sign off on some of the digital sustainability actions that we can make, I think also making the case that actually a lot of the time these things really just improve performance overall is a really good way of like getting people interested in it and understanding that this is a good thing to do overall. And that's it from me. So thank you everybody for your time. And yeah, I'm not sure. I saw Lilli on the phone for a bit through that, so I'm not sure if Jamie's joined yet.
It's not. All right. We've got Jamie in the Zoom room. So yeah, thank you so much, Arjun. That was really in depth and I think incredibly helpful, particularly for those working with websites and marketing campaigns. We've got a question in the chat for you. I'm just going to throw it straight at you. Angela Bryan Brown, do you want to unmute briefly and ask your question, or I'm happy to read it out for you?
Sure.
Where are you?
We use WordPress, and I'm sure quite a few other companies on here might as well, just because it's quite user friendly and straightforward. And I was just wondering if you just happen to know, anything specific to that or how it rates across these kinds of things.
I'm not sure off the top of my head. I as a designer, I'm not as in it with the sort of technical solution architecture and things like that. We do use WordPress, not as often anymore. I don't think there's as much of a call from it from our client base. But I do know of a client which has actually, we've used as a sustainability case study in the past, that uses WordPress. So I do believe that those tools do exist. I'm sorry I can't point you in the direction of anything.
No worries, but it's useful to know that, yeah, someone's achieving with it, so that's good.
Yeah, I think broadly, I mean, I think there obviously are kind of CMS platforms that aren't fantastic. I think a lot of them are moving in the right direction, some at a faster pace than others. From what I gather, I think WordPress is quite a positive, is making quite positive moves in that area. And I think there are a lot of things that we can do with some of these platforms to improve digital sustainability. So yeah, I don't think you're necessarily in a bad place with WordPress. I'm sorry I can't point you in the directions of any specific tools.
Thanks so much. And if you've got any more questions, we'll hopefully have time after Jamie's talk to have a bit more Q&A. But without further ado, let's move on to talking about paper. I think it's like the forgotten cousin, perhaps, in our digital worlds, but paper still plays a huge role in our rehearsal rooms, in our front of house activities, and in the theatre world. So Jamie, if you're happy to get started, over to you. I did introduce you earlier when you weren't quite here yet. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Fashionably late I am today. Nice to be here. Let me just share my screen. Can you see that? Can we all see that? Is that up? Fabulous. Let me move this. Oh. Sorry guys, I've just looked, it's technical issues all day. There we go. What's happened? Sorry, Lilli, 1 second.
Don't worry, we're bearing with you.
Yeah, I'm making a hash of this today.
Let me know if you'd like me to share the slides instead.
Can you see it? Is the slides moving there?
Yep, they are sharing.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, wonderful. So, a few cringy quotes throughout this presentation, but I think they sort of get down to outlining the reason for sustainable paper procurement, and which is sort of what I'm going to talk about today. So the greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. So our CEO, Bill Swan, this is his brother, Robert Swan. They both dedicated their lives to being climate activists. And I think it's a great quote because it shows, although the issue of climate change, also, you know, living sustainably, working sustainably while still keeping up a great economy and everyone sort of advancing is, you know, it feels like an impossible task. But I think even though if you look at on an individual level what you can do, those parts add up and it becomes a sum. And altogether, there can be definitely a big difference made. And that should be sort of what we're looking to do. So who are we? We are Recora. So I'm sustainability lead at Recora. So we were founded by Friends of the Earth in 1988. So that was Bill's charity, and it started as Paper Round. So basically, in a pre-digital world, all offices were collecting were using white paper. So no one was recycling this paper. So it was all going in general waste. So the idea of Paper Round was to collect it all, take it for recycling, and then sell it back to the buildings to create a full circular loop. It was actually extremely innovative, and no one else was doing it at the time, which is a pretty fantastic thing to get into. And I've lost my screen again, but yeah, so now from that they had to change the name because people were calling them kids asking for paper rounds at the weekend, and that's not what the business did. So they changed it to Recora, and it became a commercial waste management business. So there's 3 service divisions in it. So of course the waste management, there's also workplace supplies, and then ITAD, so that's IT disposal. So it's been selling the circular economy back since 2001, and now it has evolved into over 38 waste streams. So pretty much anything you can imagine that gets used in a commercial office building, Recourus have a way and a partner to recycle that. So some of the poignant ones, IT disposal, so taking old IT equipment, either passing that on or taking it, destroying the data inside of it sustainably, and also within certain certifications, and then taking the valuable materials and recycling them. There's things like flexible plastics, so your crisp packets, your sweet wrappers, you can't actually put them into recycling, which is quite commonly unknown. They go into general waste, but we take them, create them into storm boards, which then gets used for furniture. It gets used during construction, and I could go on all day about everything that we do, but today's about paper. But that is sort of what the business has turned into. So yes, issues now in the paper, with the paper use in the theatre industry. So of course, there's still a lot of paper which isn't being recycled in commercial buildings. We're doing our best to try to solve that. And one of the sort of the big industries where it is a problem is things like banking, also law firms, etc., and also the theatre industry is another big one. So for the theatre industry, there's a lot of problems with constant script rewrites and cue adjustments. So stage actors, stage managers, designers, like a lot of them work off different scripts, and they're all relying on paper. And also when you have all of these scripts, especially for touring companies, you've got to log around boxes of them, schedules, cue sheets, promotional leaflets. It all adds weight, adds costs, risk of loss and damage. Also storing it's very difficult. So it's a constant use of paper, which is being solved slightly with the digital age, but still a lot of people enjoy, the paper script that they take with them. This obviously comes with a big financial implication as well. So the cost of constant reprints, so every script revision, updated rehearsal schedule means a fresh printout. A lot to do with marketing waste as well. So posters, flyers often go unused, especially if the turnout's lower than expected. So these are all sort of sunk costs and wastes, which can be avoided and should be avoided. Also with program printing, so professional theatres, we work with National Theatre, and they spend thousands annually disposing show programs, which just go to waste. There's also problems, of course, with accessibility and inclusivity as well. So, for visually impaired audiences or neurodivergent practitioners who need to rely on digital tools, paper isn't the way to go. There needs to be accessibility for people as well, all people, and translation limitations too. So a lot of different languages are spoken in the industry. So multiple languages printouts is also more waste. And I think all of this comes together again to the deeper environmental lens. So you want new virgin paper. There needs to be deforestation. Large productions require hundreds of printed scripts. So contributes to a major tree loss and high waste and energy consumption in the production of this paper. So the materials also, as we've talked about before, have a short lifespan. So, it's printing things which are going to be given out and then wasted within the day, really, or within a week. So it's about reducing this. And there's also impacts with the ink and the chemical that are made with the printing. So ink, dyes and coatings, they often limit the recyclability of certain programs, etc. So it's about creating sustainable, still giving the needs to the theatre industry, but doing it in a sustainable way. And there's also lots of scope for emissions that extend beyond just the printing. So there's freight emissions from the paper suppliers, disposal costs, incineration costs if it's going to landfill, etc. So what have Recora done to solve this issue? So we have created a workplace supplies division. So we are looking at the circular economy. So we've focused on taking the waste we take from our occupiers and then turning it into products which we can then sell back to them from their own waste. So also a big focus is on the procurement for the customers, so reducing vehicle movements through London. So we will talk about that later, but it's about reducing the emissions that are being used when we deliver the said products. So circular economy paper, this is the important one today. So 80% of office paper, 80% of office waste is paper. So paper can be recycled 7 times if you collect it in a separate stream. So what Recora do, we take the paper from your premises, it's taken back to the MRF facility, which is in Purfleet in Essex, sorted into grades and bales, and then it is transformed back into paper, which is then sold back to the occupiers, closing the loop. So in just 6 weeks, the paper can be recycled and put back onto the desk, which is pretty amazing. So what happens to the paper? So all of our streams but 2 are dealt with in the UK. And the reason for this is we can track them for emissions. It's just a lot more sustainable to deal with them in the country than it is to send them elsewhere for obvious reasons. But with paper, unfortunately, paper mills in the UK are pretty much obsolete. There is actually no paper mills which now create paper. They're all made for luxury packaging. So we had to find the best way to do this without ruining the benefits of it with shipping them halfway across the world. So it goes to Greenfield in France to be pulped, and then paper mills in Austria. And then it is then sent back to the UK and sold to our occupiers. So it's a full circular loop. It's not using virgin materials, and it means that we're reducing deforestation, we're reducing the energy to create the new paper, and overall it's just a more sustainable process. And we do this with a lot of other products as well. So those notepads, the first ones you see there, are made from coffee cups. We have, as I talked about, the storm boards. We take coffee grounds and turn them into coffee logs. We take workwear and recycle it and rebrand it to different companies. Also, the quote at the bottom left by Ed Beckley, if you're not buying recycled products, you're not really recycling, is great, because, you know, it's all good putting your waste into the recycling bin, but if you're buying it back also, then that's the full loop, and that's sort of the circular economy we're trying to promote. Another thing with paper use, which isn't as related to the theatre industry, but business cards. So this is a bamboo business card. So thousands of business cards are wasted or thrown in the bin within the first week. So this is an electronic bamboo business card. You tap on the top of a phone, all your details pop up, and it just shows the innovation in the industry of just trying to reduce paper use. As I talked about, all the paper is also delivered on cargo bike deliveries, so no tailpipe emissions. You're reducing your scope 3 carbon emissions as well. There's no traffic being put onto the roads in our community, no noise pollution either. A pretty striking stat is the average number of delivery vans in London that are 3/4 empty is 39%, especially in the age of next day delivery. You know, your delivery is going out no matter what to get it there for you. So they'll just send out vans pretty much empty. And the bikes are also in London 6% faster than a van. You know, a few weeks ago was a tube strike, wasn't it? We were all flying around on line bikes. You know, you can weave in and out of the streets. So it's faster, more efficient. There's no cost implication with it, and this is sort of how we're trying to get our occupiers and customers on board to using recycled paper over buying fresh paper. And we also give them this reporting platform, so it shows how much emissions they've saved on their scope 3 from procuring from us. And yeah, it's just promoting people to stop buying virgin paper, start buying recycled paper, and make a difference. So this is a quote from National Theatre we have. We'd highly recommend Recora's office size supply service to any business looking to make a positive environmental impact without compromising on quality. And I like to end with will.i.am, waste is only waste if we waste it.
That's a great quote to end on, Jamie. Thank you so much. And a great plug from the National as well, where I know they've done really transformative things with their use of paper and different approaches. Has anybody got any paper specific questions for Jamie? Please put up your digital hand or put it in the chat, and we can come to that. I was also thinking of the quote, "Your waste is someone else's asset," and that closed loop approach to the wasted paper being turned back into things that you sell back to the same client is such an extraordinary, brilliant illustration of kind of how we can keep the value of materials as high as possible and just keep reusing things instead of actually creating any waste at all. It's an asset that we're just repurposing. So thanks so much, Jamie. It's astonishing to think we have no more paper recycling facilities. We can't do it all in the UK, but you've still managed to create the kind of lowest carbon loop possible. So yeah, really insightful. Right, I've got a couple of hands. Thank you very much. Sophie Bull in the chat. Do you want to unmute and ask a question out loud, or I can read it out for you? Where are you? Let me have a look. Okay, I will read it out because I can't quite see you on my screen, but please jump in. So it says, we're struggling to reduce printed tickets. Our audience is generally older and don't get on with e-tickets. Do you have any advice on getting them to recycle or encourage more e-ticket use?
Yes. So, of course, I think with recycling, which is sort of they'll print it at their homes, etc. Soon, in a few years, there's a new, so recently simpler recycling legislation has been put out that everyone has to, all businesses have to recycle paper, all businesses over 10 points have to recycle cardboard, etc. And soon enough, that will also be coming to the public. So across all communities, there will be recycling of paper, recycling of etc. So for those printed tickets, which, you know, they do at home, it's not really under your guise of control. Hopefully soon that there will be recycling facilities in the people's houses for when they dispose of it afterwards. And if they take them to the venue and you see them just putting it in the bin, I would just say put a paper recycling bin inside the theatre. Put a sign up saying, please put your paper tickets in here. Use a recycling company to come and collect them and do a paper collection. Recora could do that for anyone around London. And I would say that's probably the best suggestion I can come up with in terms of that.
Thank you, Jamie. And Arjun, did you want to add anything around encouraging digital ticketing or ticket use? Is there anything specific there, or otherwise we can move on to Angela's question?
Yeah, I think I mean Jamie covered in some of his talk as well about like with the flyers and things as well, and like, you know, how often are these things actually required? Can we reduce the amount that we are printing in the first place? But given that there is going to be a need for that for particular audiences always, I think a focus on design and sort of user experience and making sure that we are factoring in different types of users, older audiences, people who are less like savvy with digital products into those sort of in how we're testing and creating user experiences to make sure that online tickets are as accessible as they can be to all audiences is something to think about. And once you do that, you can test it with a number of different users and make an experience that's going to be a lot easier for them to engage with. And then you can start to begin that transition away from primarily printed tickets towards e-tickets and digital tickets. But again, it is a process. It takes people coming on that journey with you and making sure we're listening to them and understanding how users are interacting with our products to be able to get there.
Yeah, I think it really chimes with me, that user experience. Just anecdotally, I know I've taught my mum how to use e-tickets literally by showing her how to do it on her phone. And then once she's got it, she's like, yeah. So it is like that user journey, making that as easy as possible. Okay, let's move to Angela. And then I've got another question in the chat, and Daniel Evans as well. So Angela first.
Sure. And also this can be a kind of I think there are probably people in the whole Zoom that might have some thoughts on this. But something I was thinking of where for organizations where maybe we're not producing as much paper as say the National, but when it comes to scripts or feedback or trying to collect feedback or programs or marketing, flyers and posters, like there are considerations we make about digital versus paper. And I think sometimes with a program, I can feel like we put this QR code up and is anyone actually even going to scan it or read it? And I know that for the feedback forms, I've definitely spoken with some organizations where certain audiences, they're just more likely to get more robust feedback from paper feedback forms. And I guess what I'm hearing, what I've heard a lot from this conversation is like finding that balance between the different uses. But I guess I was just curious about, aside from using recyclable paper and always maybe underestimating the amount of flyers or posters you actually need, I was interested with I think someone put in the chat or mentioned just kind of reducing packaging. I don't know, it's just there are ways to challenge ourselves with our use of paper, maybe with the size of it or other ways like that. I was just curious if anyone had any thoughts on that.
What are the real really challenging our usage or thinking about usage? Is that the question? Sorry.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess just like aside from recognizing there are times when paper is actually going to be the most useful tool for certain people, sometimes because of access, sometimes because it means they'll actually engage with it. But then I guess I just want to extra challenge it by saying like, okay, aside from saying we're going to use recyclable paper, like, is there any other ways to?
Great. Great question. Has anybody done anything more radical, I guess, in this space to challenge their paper use? I can think of one thing, just to jump in, sort of tracking print accountability. So getting people to actually log how many time, like the print, like what they've printed as a regular practice, and then comparing. So it's almost like a competition about who can print the least. If you've got like a central printer and yes, everybody's double-sided and you try and minimize, but actually seeing, as we know, measuring anything, putting it on a chart, having a look at it makes you think harder about doing it. So kind of a sort of print accountability tracker might be a way of forcing different kinds of conversations. Anyone else got any answers on that? Otherwise, I'll come to Matthew in the chat, I think. Can't see any other hands up on answers, but please pop some more thoughts in the chat. And Matthew, did you want to read out your question? Oh, so you said happy for me to read it out. Apologies. Are there studies on the future of paper use and recycling? Is the expectation that paper will be reduced close to zero? I am not aware of any studies. I'm going to look to our experts, Jamie and Arjun.
I would say that already, like, average spend per head in an office on office supplies used to be around £300. It's now dropped to about £80, which shows already there's a huge reduction in office supplies or office use, which includes paper. And that's because of COVID, firstly. So people being less in the office. We're all working from home a little bit more, aren't we? Which I love, but only once a week, unfortunately. And then also it's a fallout of environmentally conscious people now, which is massively increasing, which is a great thing. But you just can't stop things in banks or law firms or with very sensitive documents that they don't want to be keeping on, potentially servers, or where there can be data breaches, etc. You can't stop them using paper because sometimes that's just how it goes. And they use confidential shredding usually, which means it is then recycled afterwards a lot of the time. But paper reduced close to zero. I would say it's not even that. It's still very low now because of the digital age. But there will always be, some use for it.
Thank you. Conscious we've got a few minutes left, so I'm going to bring in Daniel Evans. Daniel, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, less a question and more of an answer to some of the other questions that have just been raised. So,
great.
I've worked for a couple of theatres in the past, quite small, nimble ones who decided to respond to this. And one of the things that they did was try and imagine a way to combine multiple paper print uses so that you're reducing it. So like one of the things they did, for example, was they changed the design for their ticket printing so that on the back of the ticket it had like their little feedback question of like, did you enjoy tonight and where did you hear about us? So it did two things. One was it meant that they didn't print a feedback form and a ticket, which was a win. But the second thing was that it meant that the audiences were doubly encouraged to hand that piece of paper into them at the end of the show, which meant they took responsibility for recycling it rather than leaving it with the audience member. So they did that with tickets, and they've also done it with, like, say, the last page of the programme. So in that way, you can control that a higher percentage of what you have printed will be recycled because you've encouraged it to be handed in at the end. And obviously, like the stewards and chaperones and stuff in the theatre were basically expecting to collect them as they left. So I've seen that. The second thing is that if you've worked for any large organisations with like loads of staff and massive photocopiers, there's all sorts of computer systems now that are available to track who's printing what within an organisation. I used to work for Welsh National Opera for a little while, and they introduced a system like this. Everybody thought that the people who would have the highest printing needs, other than the music library, was going to be marketing, and it turned out it was development. And it was because development kept on printing, the fundraising department, they kept on printing a whole load of things at the very last minute for an event that they were doing. And once they realised that was what they were doing, they started planning their like printing needs a little bit more in advance, and they managed to reduce it. So there's if you're in a big organisation, there's all sorts of systems like that come preloaded into your computer systems with photocopiers these days. It does mean you have to like put a code in when you go to collect your stuff from the photocopier, but other than that, it's pretty good.
Yeah, what an amazing set of examples. Absolutely love that. Rethinking what you can control and what's therefore printed where in your key kind of tickets, programs, etc. Really smart ideas. Thank you, Daniel. What a great note to end on today, because we are out of time. Lots of lovely suggestions also coming through on the chat, which is just a brilliant reminder that an awful lot of you are already doing really great and best practice on digital and on paper, and sharing that knowledge is one of the biggest ways we can motivate each other to just keep doing that little bit more. So thank you all very much for being here. We are going to put these webinars online in a couple of weeks' time, so your colleagues can watch them back. And we're always available to answer more questions or put you in touch with Arjun or Jamie to answer more complicated ones. But thank you very, very much for coming, and have an excellent rest of your Thursdays.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Goodbye.